Hi, my name is Scott Love, and today I want to take a look with you at the book of Numbers, which is one of the 5 books of the Pentateuch. And this book can also be referred to as In the Wilderness, and that is because that's what makes up this book is the time that Israel spent wandering in the wilderness. Many might refer to this book as a boring book, say, oh man, I don't want to read the book of Numbers because maybe the title is Numbers. But really, this is an action packed book. And in the last 20 years that I've been pastoring and in leadership, I have gained so much encouragement from reading about Moses' leadership and some of the challenges that he faced in this book. Numbers picks up at Sinai, and this is the beginning point. There's 5 phases in the book of Numbers, and those phases are made up of 3 stops where the Israelites are camping out, and then they are moving twice. So there's 2 phases where they're traveling. The journey that this nation is taking should really take about 2 weeks, but ends up being a 40-year journey. So that in itself is encouraging when you feel like you should be much further than you are in ministry and you should have gained more ground and should have achieved more goals. But you kind of have to stop and realize that the growth happens in the journey. It's not just about the destination. So for about a year, Israel is at Mount Sinai. Moses receives the 10 Commandments. The tabernacle is built, and Israel, the camp is organized around the tabernacle. The Levites and then all the other tribes are kind of established and put in place. And the presence of God is right there in the middle of the camp. God gives them a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And Moses has already made it clear to God in Exodus, God, I'm not going anywhere unless you go with me. And so this cloud, this fire kind of represents God's presence, and it's what's leading the people. And it also is a sign to the enemy that God is with them. I believe that I have probably made some of the same kind of statements over the years saying, God, I'm not doing anything or going anywhere unless you clearly tell me and show me and give me the steps to take. And so this cloud moves and they pack up camp and they start traveling into the second phase on this journey. And so initially there's a lot of excitement and there's kind of a good morale, but that quickly turns into the people complaining and overwhelming Moses with problems and accusations. And even Moses' own family seems to turn their backs on him and starts accusing him. And I can't imagine what the burden these people had to be. It had to be so overwhelming. And so in chapter 11, Moses turns to God, makes a statement that I think many leaders have maybe made, or at least they've thought it, and they're like, God, what did I do to deserve this? And if you're going to deal with me this way, then kill me now and put me out of my misery. So God hears and he gives a wise plan, and he brings 70 elders to Moses to help carry the burden. And this ministers deeply to me in seasons where I have needed and I've received help. God has put people in place when I've desperately needed their help to keep my head above water and sanity to lead forward. So they arrive at phase 3 and they enter into Paran, and Moses sends 12 spies out to scout the land, which is the whole reason they're there, is to go into the promised land. 2 come back excited, Joshua and Caleb, and all 10 of the rest of the spies are like, there's no way we're going in there. There's giants in the land. We can't do this. And their lack of faith will cause them to be a generation that's going to die in the wilderness and never enter into God's promise. So Moses was caught in the middle of this faithless people, 2 faithful and the rest faithless, and then a whole nation of people who have a majority vote to not trust God and even complain about the current situation so much they're telling Moses, we were better in Egypt as slaves than we are now. What a difficult situation to lead in. And yet God sustained Moses. And there's no doubt in my mind that he received the endurance he needed by the moments that he spent in God's presence and receiving strength from him. Then, as if this rebellion couldn't get any worse, this Levite Korah rebels and stirs this uprising. And this passage just ministers to me. God says, take a staff from all 12 of the tribes and put their names on them and place them in the tabernacle. And the next day they go in, and Aaron's staff none of the rest, but Aaron's staff has budded. It's come to life. And what a great picture of the call of God and the mantle of authority to the leader that he has chosen. When God calls and he anoints, there will be a life-giving power made available to that leader. And next we go into the traveling again. We enter phase 4, and the people complain about thirst, and they start accusing Moses. And God tells Moses to speak to a rock to call water out, and instead he strikes the rock in anger. He takes matters in his own hands, and he actually rebels against God, and this gives him the same fate as the rest of Israel. He'll never enter into the promised land. Lesson learned the hard way. To obey God's leadership and not to take things into our own hands and do things our own way. And I think the temptation for pastors is to follow a formula of another's patterns of success, but we must hear from God. We must do things according to his plan to get his results. And of course, the people again complain, and again God's judgment has to come down, and there's these poisonous snakes that are killing everybody, that are unleashed. And a true shepherd-hearted man that Moses is, even though the people have turned their backs on him many times, he intercedes for them, and God gives them a way out. They lift up a bronze snake, and as people look at it, they're healed and they're saved. The last stop is in the plains of Moab, and Israel is confronted by a pagan king who hires Balaam, a sorcerer, to curse Israel. And God intervenes again faithfully to these people. And all that Balaam can speak are blessings over Israel. What a picture of God's protection as you're walking with him, that those who are set out to curse you will fail as God turns what the enemy plans for evil into good. So Moab is the last stop before the promised land that Joshua is going to eventually lead the people into. And the difficulty and the struggle that I feel as I relate to Moses of having to lead this massive disgruntled group of people most definitely makes me thankful and appreciative for the assignments he's given me and the grace that he provides that is sufficient to do what he's called and commissioned me to do. And hopefully it encourages you as well to trust in God's strength, his faithfulness, and his grace as you lead.